I'm done talking about the Packers. I have no questions about them. I want to spend no more of my time or energy thinking about the 2022 Packers. Really, the only thing that matters for them this week is seeing the Cowboys offense through a certain lens. You have Rashawn Gary now out for the season. Devondre Campbell is out. Rasul Douglas not practicing. Preston Smith also banged up right now. That matters because the question I have for the Cowboys is, what does this Cowboys offense look like against a half-decent NFL defense? And what does that mean for how far they can take it this season?
And it's really, really annoying from a big picture perspective because I wanted to see them, they play this personnel game where they can just throw a random grouping at you with a random formation, right? And you have no sense when that personnel grouping gets to the huddle what the formation will be. And once they catch you out, they can jump into tempo. And Dak is the master. He is the closest thing we have to Manning of modulating tempo. And he'll just run the same thing over and over again. Not in a Dable, I don't have players way, but in a I've caught you way. And now watch me cook, right? And the Packers are the only team, no matter what you think of how the defenses perform, where body type wise, they can match up to you in the huddle, right? It doesn't matter what you throw out there because they got Quay Walker and he can play in the slot or he can play in the box, right? Whether he plays well there or not, they at least have the bodies. So I wanted to see the Cowboys when they couldn't have, for lack of a better phrase, this cheat code of we can out personnel you, out formation you, and once we've got you, our quarterback makes decisions quicker than anyone in the NFL. And it's just a shame that given the injuries, we might not get to see that.
It's such an underrated way that Dak affects the game and when he's in there. It's not just what he's able to do as a thrower against the blitz. We've talked about that a million times. Just the small, subtle ways he can control the game and kind of hold the pen last for the Cowboys offense. I don't think that gets nearly appreciated enough.
No, he is the closest thing to Manning. He's not regularly discussed as being Peyton Manning, but he's the only guy doing that stuff in the league right now. The whole thing flows through him. I do think Cooper Rush having those few weeks, I don't know if it made something click or this was always the game plan, but things do feel simpler and a bit more predetermined, which I think has helped them. I think Dak being in a, as we said, let him cook type role where it's hit the back foot, get the ball out, and they just give him a ton of options, and it's not as give him 3 plays. It does not seem from the outside, give him 3 plays, let him go pick up the line of scrimmage. So they seem to be getting in and out of everything a lot quicker, and it feels to me a bit more predetermined. And I like that for him, even though I think he's a genius who can pick all the plays in the world and call it all from the line of scrimmage. But you put that now with the added run element of him not scrambling quite as much, but that's what they need to be as we get to the postseason because they just have the guys to win one-on-one, down in, down out on the perimeter anymore. Plus the boot stuff. Plus we saw the option game being back, and they had just some huge, I know they've been playing 2 terrible defenses back to back, but some explosive runs, either him carrying it on the Y lead stuff or the double stacks, Josh Heupel, here we go stuff with, and they just read one guy, and defense is considering Dak again as a true rushing threat is just a game over type situation for them, particularly down the red zone.
The red zone is exactly where it's hugely valuable. And that's always all I've asked of them. He doesn't need to run the ball all the time. But if you have a guy with that sort of mobility, as the field starts to shrink, why wouldn't you try to flip the numbers in your advantage? And that's the thing about this is I totally agree with you. The Cooper Rush thing, I do think had some light bulbs go off in that building. It's like, well, why wouldn't we just drop Dak into this version of the offense? What could that look like? And you're weaponizing his movement skills, getting him on the move, all of the play action stuff they can do under center. It's a simpler, more effective offense with a better quarterback. I think that's the results that we're seeing. So the 2 questions I have now is, can this keep up as they play better defenses, teams that aren't the Bears, that aren't the Lions? We have yet to see that. And the other thing is, do they have one more move left to make? Because my biggest concern about this offense and this version of the offense, even if I'm very excited about it in the same way I think you are, what is the ceiling on it with their pass catching options? And if you drop Odell Beckham into this equation, which isn't just a pipe dream, it seems very realistic that they could make that happen. Then what does it look like and how far can they push this thing?
That's the one for me because I think Gallup's been pretty limited. He's kind of their slant or glance guy, right? They line him up outside, and it's if Dak wants to get rid of it quickly, that's where it's going. And you can start to pinch on that. And their offensive line is kicking ass on the ground. They are just bullying people right now. And I didn't think that group would coalesce that quickly. I just didn't think they had as much talent anymore. Still, I think pretty susceptible.
Steele has been great. Smith has been great. I mean, on the ground, those guys can really hurt people.
It is still, to me, susceptible in the passing game. And I think them having a second fiddle to CD who can be a bit more dynamic in what they ask him to do, particularly in not just having to be Schultz all the time at the intermediate level. I think that is where they're missing something right now, and someone who can be you can slide onto their second best cover guy and feel pretty confident in. And that is the one missing dynamic for me. And if it's Odell, then that's gonna be a pretty scary looking offense.
Things they've done well over the last couple weeks, things that have looked easy that your word are going to look a little harder against better competition. What would that be? The number one thing?
That's a great question. I mean, can they continue to run the ball that well when they're playing dominant fronts and teams that play 5 down and play it appropriately and well, and not just basically conceding someone at the linebacking core? One thing that jumped out to me that I've just always liked about them is they are the best team in the league. I come up with these stupidly niche lists of who is the best at these really random, weird things. They are the best team at that worked and we didn't execute it. We are running that on the first drive the next week. They had the CD touchdown last week, which was off the jet motion into the wheel post, which all teams run now, right? You basically get someone in a tight split running a post, but you get the guy on the move, which should be unfair, right? It should be illegal. CD's getting a running head start. They ran that twice the week before and Dak missed, and you could see him, smack his own helmet saying, man, I should have hit that. The very next game, the second drive, they say, we're going back to that play. That is what they are best at IDing is knowing that they run stuff that through personnel alone, because they got better players, is we know this is open, right? If we execute, it's open. And that's where they are one of those groups where when they execute certain things correctly, they are unstoppable. It's not a matchup type thing to me. They just have better players sometimes.
How did you feel about Kellen Moore coming into this season?
I thought that last season was quite naive. And I thought once you got a lot of the head coaching stuff, there was way too much gimmick-based stuff. I love, obviously, how dynamic they are in terms of formations and personnel groupings. For me, as an X's and O's nerd, it's catnip. It's the greatest thing. And I think Dak, as I mentioned, is the closest thing we have to Manning. So marrying those two things together should be pretty great. But I do think that, I think Nate's talked about this before, it being a high degree of difficulty offense, that there was not always enough easy wins, and too many of those easy wins came out of gimmicky type stuff. When you watch Andy Reid, all that stuff is pretty sound structurally, and you can trace back through the 70s and 80s. They just look a bit different because he's got these crazy athletes now, right? It's most of the basic man beater concepts ever. He just gets them in some kind of cool, creative way, or put some kind of motion into it. So I thought there was a little bit too much of look how smart the OC is. And you just wanted to grab him and say, hey, sometimes you have Dak Prescott and these receivers, they were outrageous. Could we maybe just put him in the gun and let him go to work for a bit? And so, as we said before, maybe the Cooper Rush thing, the light bulb moment of, yeah, I'm just going to run this offense that flows really well, fits really nicely. We can do some cool stuff still with personnel and formations. But I'm going to every now and then just let Dak have a drive where it looks like a pretty normal but sophisticated NFL offense. And I have an unbelievable quarterback who can execute that.
It's funny because my concern and my frustration with it, going back multiple years, is that it was too static for me. It was that they would just line up, nobody would move. And if that's because they want Dak to just have the controls, right? You're sitting there like, talk about Peyton Manning. It's exactly how Peyton Manning used to play. But there are moments where that was frustrating to watch. And now I think it's the right mix of there are elements where he has the game in his hands when he's using tempo, when teams are blitzing, all of that, but you're still pressing the easy buttons. It's the right mixture of how you can weaponize him, but also making the game easy for him. And I just don't feel like over the last couple of years, they'd ever found that mix. But over the last 2 weeks, this just feels right. This is the version of the Cowboys offense that I want to watch. And now we get to see if they can keep it rolling.